Hi and welcome to this OWASP event. We're here at Go2, that is Internet Stiftelsen's rooms that we can rent for free. So a big thank you to Internet Stiftelsen that lets us be here. A little bit about OWASP Stockholm. We're 4 chapter leaders. We have Shane, who set up this camera and I think went outside. We also have Henrik, and we have Sanjin, who is on parental leave. We are the chapter leaders that try to keep this community together, organize some events for you. We have a bunch of QR codes with our contact information, so if you want to get notified about new events, we have a mailing list, we have a web page, a meetup page, we also have a Slack page, so feel free to follow us there to get notified when we have new events. Before we start, we want to thank our sponsor that sponsored the pizzas and drinks, Akamai.
Hello, and since we did that, I get to say a few words. I promise you I will be very brief. So, as you heard, we are sponsoring the pizza and drinks tonight, and it might be that you heard of Akamai before, or it could be that you are already a customer. In any case, you're probably using Akamai services daily, on a daily basis. We were the first content delivery network in the world, started out about 25 years ago. And over the time, we ventured into cybersecurity. So we are now the largest platform for internet security and protecting companies from distributed denial of service attacks, layer 7 attacks using web application firewalls and API security solutions. And we also, a couple of years ago, bought a cloud hosting company called Linode. It's more known as linode.com than Akamai Cloud. So we are keeping that name. Since Olle is going to present on CycloneDX, I tested to install it on Linode and decided that, all right, why shouldn't you leave here with the possibility to just try it out yourself as well? So I have yet another QR code here. So I'll pass this around. It's a $100 voucher, so you can get started on linode.com and try it out as well. With that, over to Olle.
So, can you hear me?
Cool.
And also, we will be recording from this camera in the middle, not the ones on the ceiling, just so you know. So if you have any questions, it will be recorded, just so you know.
Will we be published?
Hopefully.
If you behave badly, we will have proof. So, I'm very happy to be here. I've become a member of OWASP a year ago after taking a journey I'm going to talk about today. And become a member of the OWASP CycloneDX industry working group, also part of the ECMA standardization of the OWASP CycloneDX standard, working especially with discovery and retrieval, something we call the Transparency Exchange API. But during that work, I discovered, oh, there's a Stockholm group, cool, and contacted Davis. So I came from the wrong side, so to say, and found the Stockholm group, and I'm very happy to be here. I've been working in the software business all my life with various bits and pieces, a lot of network software, and also embedded systems, security embedded systems, PKIs. I participated in the Asterisk open source project as a lead developer for the zip channel for 10 years. So I'm an old open source guy as well. But what I'm here for is to talk about something new that's going to happen. You're going to be regulated. The software industry that I've worked with all my life has never been regulated. Car industry, medical industry, other industries, they have regulation. Software, no. No liability, no regulation. And there's, funny enough, I discovered that there's a worldwide competition in regulations. Did you know that? Have you watched the TV channels? Do you keep the scores? No. But the EU is very proud to be the first to really regulate the software industry and do it hard. So we have something called the EU Cybersecurity Act. And under that umbrella, we have DORA, we have NIS2, we have the AI Act that came extremely quickly, and something that's going hard that I will focus on called the Cyber Resilience Act. We see similar regulations coming worldwide, even in China. But they start with various areas like IoT or this sector or that sector. But the EU, they took it all. They're going to regulate embedded systems, mobile apps, laptop apps, server apps, anything. So you are going to be regulated. Isn't that cool? Haven't you been waiting for it? Oh, sorry. So the problem really is that the software we work with, and people like I have worked with for a long time, has caused serious damage to society. And what the politicians are saying is that, well, the cost for the society for all of this, I mean, remember Coop closing stores, you remember Theatre Every, the cost for society is so high, so we have to do something. And the vendors keep saying, oh, it's up to the customer. We send them recommendations for firewalls. We tell them how to protect themselves, but it's not our business. No. And the regulators are coming and saying, it is your business. We'll make it by regulation, by law, your business to protect your customers. Because the cost is too high. So we're going to do something. Enough is enough. It's time to shift the balance and put pressure on the vendor. The vendor needs to secure their applications, needs to be transparent and tell the users. So before purchase, I need to be able to verify the vendor and the product from a security perspective. And this is such a big change. Products sold 3 years from now have to be secure by default and secure by design. Otherwise, you won't be able to place it on the market. And when developing software, estimate says that for most products sold, about 90% of the code is open source. That's how we build software now. We take libraries, we take components, we take frameworks, write a small layer of our own business logic. And it's free. It's beautiful. Hey, Christoph. Now I recognize you. So, when I work with open source, how many here are open source developers? A few friends. Cool. I developed a free telephony server. And there were companies calling me saying, oh, we built our business around this, and we have millions of calls, and we earn this a lot of money. But we have this problem, and they want me to do it for free. Fix their problem for free, because I'm open source. Open source is free, doesn't cost. So of course it helps the business model. But now all those dependencies will be the responsibility of the vendor, of the manufacturer. When selling a product, the manufacturer or the importer that places it on the market, the EU market, will be fully responsible. That's a very interesting perspective. So, if you have dependencies that you don't know about. Well, that's a problem. Dependencies is something you can handle because you can blame someone else up to a point when the EU changes that. Then you have to start looking at your own code. Your own code have to be secure by default, secure by design. And that's a huge step for many, many vendors. Remember Log4j, log shell issue. It cost so much work because we didn't have the tool sets. People didn't know. Customers, this was a 0-day vulnerability, really, really bad. Vendors and customers called me from all over the world saying, oh, I need you to sign this form. I was like, neither Asterisk or Camellia, the two main projects I work with, are in Java. We can't use that library even if we wanted to. We're C. Oh, but you need to sign this form. Imagine how much time and money was spent to try to find out if our platforms, our services within our company are vulnerable to this issue. I mean, this was on the Swedish news, Log4j, right? It was that big. But trying to find out if we had a problem costed money. Then fixing it. Okay. So, CRA in short. 1. Shift responsibility to the manufacturer. Okay? I said that. That's a huge change. Manufacturers need to be aware. Free security updates for the lifetime of the product. And the vendor are not allowed to single-handedly define the lifetime. Because if they were, they will sell you something and say, about 3 weeks lifetime, of course. That's the expected lifetime. No, market authorities will try to regulate this. Free security updates. You have to. And if you fix vulnerabilities, you have to publicly tell the world, not your customers, the world, about problems you fixed. Basically, this is the good old CE mark that we all know and love when we buy products. Up to now, it's been for hardware, radio regulation and that kind of stuff. Now it becomes a mark for software. Apps in the App Store. Gadgets you buy at Clas Ohlson and Company. Stuff you buy mail order. Server apps, databases, other things. Everything needs a CE mark and a certificate of compliance. They're going to be regulated. And even if you're not writing a single line of code, if you're bringing products into the EU market, you are liable. That's a very interesting perspective. For quite some time, with the first proposal of the Cyber Resilience Act, it looked like app stores would be liable, that GitHub would be liable for placing products on the market. And you have to secure your software supply chain. Issues like SolarWinds, where someone injected bad code, not to hurt SolarWinds, but to be able to hurt and break in at customers. That's a huge problem. You need to secure your whole software supply chain. Secure commits, sign commits. Look at your build systems, look at your CI/CD systems, your DevSecOps pipes, all of that. We keep asking one of the projects I work with, GitLab, how can we be sure that your platform is secure? Oh, we're big, we have this many. You're not even delivering signed software. How can we be sure that you do your homework? Oh, we have this many. I'm not asking that. So even companies like that aren't prepared. We have security tools that we paid elderly customer of mine paid millions for. And the instructions when I should install it is, bring home this script with curl, pipe it to sudo bash. A security tool? No signatures, no verification, nothing. I mean, I understand why Brussels is changing. So, securing the supply chain, really important. So, we all thought that the Cyber Resilience Act would be put into law before the EU election. Now, they didn't have enough resources because they got other priorities. In the legal department, they go through all the text produced by the Parliament and the Commission. So it didn't happen. But it's in the pipeline. It's going to come early fall after we have a new Commission and we have a new Parliament and all of that. They all agreed in the trilogue last December. So there's no big issues surrounding this. Publication in the official EU journal that you all read every morning is the starting point. After that, we have 20 days, I believe, until it becomes a law. I mean, it's not a directive, it's a law. NIS2 is a directive that has to be implemented in local laws. This will apply EU-wide, right? Then we have 2 steps. 21 months after the publication, we have to have a vulnerability handling process. We have to publish all known vulnerabilities in our source code. That means we have to track all dependencies in our source code. That means we have to have an SBOM. And that was the whole topic of my talk. Oh, I have 200 more slides. This is going to be a shitstorm for many companies. If you haven't published any vulnerabilities at all, and suddenly you publish 2,300 for your embedded system with Linux, because you haven't upgraded for 5 years, what will your customers say? Right? After that, you have to report any exploits within 24 hours to the authorities. So if something happens in your customer base, you have a report. Come Christmas, come Easter, come Swedish lovely holidays for 5 weeks, 24 hours. Okay? So that's step 1. And it's a huge step for most. Step 2. Now you have to have code secure by design. Encryption for all communication. You have to have full privacy control. You have to have security by default in the configuration. You have to have, it's a whole new world. For many companies, many products, you have to rebuild the full product in order to get there. Or you can't sell. One company I worked with 2 years ago, we're selling a product and they're still selling, I checked today. Well, the developer retired 5 years ago. 1 year after that, the license for the development tools expired and no one bothered. The developer's laptop is missing, so we haven't got the source code, and the product is selling. Okay. Do you think they will pass the tests? So, the EU is pointing straight at product managers and development teams and say that, well, you need to take security seriously through the product's lifecycle. From the first whiteboard, from the same design to the grade, to destruction. You are responsible. And 24 months of transition, clear guidelines. No new features, no new blinking lamps. Focus on security. This is actually in the legal text. And you have to be transparent about cybersecurity aspects of your products. You have to provide a risk assessment in your certificate of compliance. You have to Be open about all security issues you fix. That's a culture change. Have I got anything on my car charger I have at home? No. Not a word. So, everything from mobile apps to embedded systems, excluding software as a service, but there's a but. If you sell something that is depending upon a service in the cloud, that service is included. So if you're selling a GPS tracker for dogs that relies on an app and GPS trackers, of course, CRA, but also the cloud service. It's a funny little text about remote data processing. But there are other vertical businesses that have strict regulations. Military, cars, flights, the proper regulations that are stricter, and they've been having it for quite some time, so they are excluded in the text. They classify products in a few different classes. This is the old one, but the change isn't that much. They say that most of the products will be self-assessment. And that is how the CE mark works today. It's mostly self-assessment, right? But for some product classes, you have to comply with either a well-known, well-defined standard or get a third-party certification. And the rules for this is coming out shortly. We have the first certification that has been published by ECMA, the European Union Cybersecurity Authority. It's called the EU Common Criteria certification. And this applies to many of the regulations within the cybersecurity umbrella from the EU. They also have, this is from the first Commission proposal, they have moved around some of the classes of products and defined a process for managing that in the future as well. So, repeat myself, 2 phases. The first one, manage vulnerabilities, report, inform customers. And the reason I have 2 different dates here is that there were many proposals in the EU. You have the Commission proposal, then you have the Parliament, and you have the Council. So there are, but they at the end they agreed on 21. I would like to have been in that meeting. How on earth did they come up with such an uneven number of months? 21 months. Compromises, I guess. Phase 2, 36 months. And don't lay back and relax and say, oh, I have 3 years. For most, it's a very, very short time. So get your act together. There's a lot of text about transparency to customers. Customers should be able to make an informed choice. So when you go from here about, and remember something about CRA, remember that security by design, security by default, the vendors are responsible for the full product, and customers need transparency before purchase as well. So, when you buy a lawnmower today, somewhere in the paperwork that most of you don't read, there is actually a certificate declaration of conformance with the CE regulation that specify exactly which regulations you're conformant with, and there's a signature and a name. And this is exactly the same with the CRA. And as I said, you can certify in many different ways. They talk a lot about horizontal standards, and we don't know where that will end up. When talking with the Commission, they say that, oh, there are going to be about 40 different horizontal standards. One problem for open source is that most of them cost a lot of money. Participating, because there are groups now like Sensor and Elec, they're developing this. Participating, becoming a member of that club costs a lot of money. And of course in open source we haven't got that money. So Eclipse Foundation have started a project trying to get funding and trying to work out some sort of horizontal standard that we can actually access that will be published in the open. In the annex of the Cyber Resilience Act, there's a lot of detailed requirements. This is from the first proposal from the Commission. And there's a lot of cool buzzwords here without explanation. What is secure by design, secure by default? Who knows? Well, there has been some common documents coming out, fun enough, from CISA, the American version of ENISA. But that document, called Secure by Design, is co-written by the Dutch and Netherlands security authorities as well. And that makes me believe that that's one of the documents that's going to be incorporated here as well. And as I said, supply chain security is critical. You have to save a lot of documentation for 10 years after the final sale of the product. And I assume that will include logs on how you built the product. Because if there's an exploit, they will ask you exactly which components and how you build the binary that executes. And this is an area where there's a lot of work going on. If you heard about in toto attestations, Christopher smiles now. That's one of the areas. And in the the latest release of CycloneDX, we actually included attestations within the bill of materials. And there's a reason for that as well. So, you can say that, well, I'm just going to put CE mark on my software and go on as always. No one's going to notice. Well, if you're involved in an exploit or someone notices, a researcher, a customer, someone else, 15 million euro or 2.5% of your company worldwide revenue, whichever highest. That's the maximum fine. So they're putting the bar so high. So this is a matter for the board of directors, for your CEO and the people above it. It's such a high risk for the company. So this is a question on that level to make sure that you comply with this or stop selling. They're giving me a huge baseball bat to fight with all the security issues I opened in the bug trackers, and that has been so far down the backlog, so they naturally compost and get reassigned to some other issue, I think. They disappear. That's not going to happen. So what are you going to do when you come home to your project? Well, look at your products. Try to define, from reading the text and the slides, looking at the video again. Imagine, I think you can, what is a CRA compliant product? Come on, you've been working with this. You know. And then look at your products and try to define the gap. You'll find products that will never make it. You'll find products that are very, very close. Really good development work. And if you find those products that won't make it, they need to be shifted out. They need to be replaced totally. You won't be allowed to sell them. Your resellers shouldn't be allowed to sell them. They shouldn't be in warehouses when the law comes. Oops. Suddenly I have a very short time. So this is something I'm trying to do with my customers. It's hard. Security is hard. Even though we have a big, huge bat coming from the EU. It's really hard. So the regulation will be in place this year. I don't think there's any question about it. It would be that we get a very strange new parliament that suddenly changes everything. But from all the protocols, all the meetings, there hasn't been any discussion like that, any opposition really. There's been discussion about how to protect the small and medium-sized businesses, and I've been involved in a lot of discussion about open source and the CRA, because the first proposal would have killed open source in Europe. But luckily they listened and they fixed that. They even went so far, so the people who wrote the CRA, they visited FOSDEM in February this year to have discussions with open source developers in the community. I just got to love them. People from bureaucracy actually reaching out. And they told us that we're so used to people coming to us. All the big companies come to us. But we realized that you open source guys haven't got the resources, and you're responsible for 90% of the code. So we have to come to you. Good. So, supply chain attacks are on the rise. We hear new things all the time. I try to launch a new concept saying that, well, when you add a library, an open source library to your product, you don't have to pay anything, right? That's in the licensing. But for everything you add during the product's lifetime, there will be a cost because you have to manage that, you have to update that, you have to follow vulnerabilities. And if the project dies, you will have to take over or replace it. So it's not that there's zero one-time cost. There's a zero initial cost, but then there will be a cost for every single day the product is used out there. Not every single day you sell it, but after sale day, you have to continue for the product's lifetime to support free security updates. So cost per dependency, I think that's something the Excel people will understand. And you have to talk in a different way to your customers, resellers, and partners. And that's a huge change for many companies. When we buy products from the big companies, Cisco, Apple, Microsoft, we're very used to get security reports. But for the majority of the software I have, never happens. So there's a lot of text out there. I'm a member of Dataföreningen. We run a seminar, I think it's the fourth Thursday of every month. So on Thursday, we have a free lunch seminar at 12 o'clock about software supply chain security with two members of the Shane's project at Royal Technical High School in Stockholm. So find me on LinkedIn, find that seminar, or go to Dataföreningen website and you'll find Talk CRA with us. But you can also find recordings on YouTube from our seminars on that. So, I have a few minutes. Davis took so much of my time talking about all this stuff and Akamai offers and all that. So I'll continue for another 2 hours now. Don't worry. At the heart of CRA, and even these two, is that you have to check your dependencies. You have to be in control of your software. And that is something that relates to the software bill of materials. I'm not going to talk specifically about CycloneDX and the project. I'm going to talk about this in a very general way because there are multiple standards and I happen to end up in CycloneDX because there's some work that needs to be done. I didn't tell you much about myself, but I feel I know you now. So I can tell you a bit more personal stuff, right? I'm an open source developer, consultant, IETF activist, and much more. And I live in Sollentuna. I own the most beautiful dog in the universe. Very objective, Gordon, a miniature schnauzer, right? And I'm lactose intolerant. I have to take a special pill to eat the pizzas out here. So all the time when I buy food, I can't trust that, oh, I know how to make this. There's no milk in here. Because there's milk in every crazy thing. Milk, skim milk powder is very cheap. And they add it to all kinds of stuff where it shouldn't be. So I have to read all this stuff. I take off my glasses and, okay, no milk. And products that I've been buying for years can suddenly have milk because it was cheaper than something else. It's crazy, right? So that's my life. on a very personal note. I have one other allergy. I can't stand curl. It's really hard because I'm a friend of Daniel Stenberg, the main developer, but I can't stand it. I really feel ill when it's in my any product, and it's in almost every product. So how the hell do I know if it's inside when I buy stuff? How do I know if there's curl inside? Right? Because bad things happen. We already talked about that. Log4j, all the customers become worried, right? They looked at their whole IT support, printers, systems, e-shopping, everything. I said, where do I have Log4j? How can I make priorities? So they said, well, call all vendors, send forms, request answers, yesterday. It was totally crazy over that weekend. And all the vendors and open source project were busy. Right? So, looking at this, a whole industry said we can't do this again. If I own IT products, I have to know when the next 0-day problem comes, where it is. I have to know so I can make my priorities. All my printers, turn them off because I need to focus on my web store. I need to focus on the supply chain. I need to focus on the important parts. But with Log4j, people weren't ready. So in order to solve this, we really want to know. And there were so many issues here. I talked with one vendor, because I'm a member of a very interesting club called the SBOM Forum. We have Friday afternoon, evening meetings and talk very openly. And they said, well, our installer used Log4j. So the customers that operated software didn't have any problem. But new customers or reinstalls would be a problem. So it was a very hard problem. The conclusion here is we need to automate. We need to know digitally. And there are tons of tools. This is an exciting market. There are many new vendors that promise you everything. They will solve everything in one piece of software, a cloud service. Right. Exposing all my internal IT to an unknown cloud service won't happen. But there are standardized data formats, there are scanners of everything, there are detection systems, third-party assessments. There's a whole world happening. And this is where I thrive. I think this is fun. There's so much going on, and the bits and pieces are quickly coming together by very, very intelligent, smart people like Christopher, right? So it's cool. It's a fun area. But at the heart is this. It's the list of ingredients of any piece of software, whether it's in an embedded system, a firmware for a motherboard or a processor, or an app you download, right? Containers. It should be a digitally signed file, because this is kind of a proof from a vendor to you. It's used to track vulnerabilities. It was originally built to track licenses for open source, because that was the primary issue back then, wanting to make sure we have full control of all the licenses and all the components we use. But we started to use it to track vulnerabilities as well. There are two main formats. SPDX, which is an ISO standard and developed by a group within the Linux Foundation connected to Open Source Security Foundation. And CycloneDX from OWASP, right? CycloneDX will become an ECMA standard fairly soon. We have a 600-page document to go through, and we do have one meeting per week with ECMA to go through that, because we have to read through the whole standard, and it's a huge standard. So there are many usages apart from the two main, vulnerabilities and license handling, and I'll try to talk about them. Some developer teams or customers come to me and say, oh, we have our SBOM, we're done. And look at me and want to get confirmation from that. Good work. I say, good work, but which SBOM? Because there's one you build in your design, and there's another one when you build your software, the development machines, another one for testing and running, then you put it in runtime in containers, and maybe you sell something to customers. And that's very important, because that's a legal binding document in many industries, like the medical industry. So then you have to be really sure of what you have in your SBOM, that you have the right kind of information. And you need all of these to have control of your software supply chain and what you're doing. So the external SBOM, that's fixed for a specific version of your software. It doesn't change until you release something new. Then you have a new SBOM related to that version. Unless you have spelling errors or you forgot a component, then of course you need to update your SBOM. But normally it doesn't. And it should include the upstream SBOMs. Remember, especially in the CRA case, you are responsible for everything you sell. So that's something we have to start working with if we're manufacturing things. We have a few years to deliver to our customers. What about our vendors? If we buy commercial software, commercial tooling, like I talked about GitLab, if you buy boards with firmware, what are their process? Will you get SBOMs from them? Will you get vulnerability information digitally through the API that doesn't exist yet, that we're working on? Due diligence is an important part of this. And there will be an SBOM for your development code, but for all releases that you have out there, the customers use. And that can be quite a lot if you have 5 years of support by law, and you release at least once a quarter, plus a few security updates between that, right? As a customer, the CRA doesn't give me any obligation to deliver SBOMs to customers, doesn't forbid it either. So as a customer, I would surely require SBOMs from all my manufacturers, because I want to answer that question about Log4j. I want to know if something happens, where in my IT system I have that component. Yes?
So you mentioned like the customer in this case. So how about the open source software and those? Because you also mentioned like what kind of tooling you're using for building the software.
Mm-hmm.
So not just the artifacts being shipped and what components they are made up, but also the pipelines, right?
Yeah.
So what obligation do open source developer have to disclose what kind of build pipelines they use to build those things? I mean, not just the source code by itself.
In that case, if you look in the CRA, what obligations does open source projects have to deliver information like vendors have? Well, in the CRA, open source vendors are somehow, they're excluded from all liability, right? There's a new role called open source steward defined in it, and we really don't know yet what it is. There's a lot of work going on to try to define all of this. But there won't be any liabilities, there won't be any monetary damage. But there are some regulation there. But I've been actually in discussions with the Log4j team. They're kind of funny. They started the meeting with, we're the ones that caused all this. Yeah, right, okay. That was a good starting point. But we haven't really sorted out what the obligation is, because some of the library vendors, they want to produce an SBOM to show the dependency you should use to produce a clean version of their library, with no vulnerabilities. And I had a discussion the other day with a developer in Manchester about how we could use that in our tooling, kind of a reference SBOM, I thought we called it. Others, like Daniel with curl, I shouldn't mention it, sorry. He developed source code. That's not a product. Debian builds a curl binary. So then it's up to Debian to build an SBOM. So we're trying to sort this out. There's a lot of work. Eclipse Foundation in Europe, that's the European Foundation for Open Source. Funny enough, most of the other organizations I'm talking about are US-based. They're spearheading a lot of this work, trying to figure out what this means for the CRA. So follow us and we will try to publish some information soon. So, the SBOM in practice then. Well, if I start with a good old Debian system, I can list everything installed. And of course I have Asterisk, the open source PBX. Well, it's part of my life, so that's a good example. I can, in Debian, check the dependencies of the Asterisk package, and I get a long list of things that needs to be installed. So now I have Asterisk, and I have a lot of dependencies. There is, of course, things that go kind of circular. On this link, you'll find an extremely good talk with two ladies from Google dependency project, where they talk about the dependencies for various package managers like NPM, CPAN, Maven, and others. And they use Sudoku as an example. Check it out, and you'll see how complex this word can become. So, in some of these languages I mentioned, Python and others, you actually define dependencies. And now you can either pin them to a specific version or keep a rather open mind like this, saying, well, I want the latest and greatest, that's fine. A bit scary, but you can. And there are different religions on which of these that are good. Look at the talk. And I found Python OpenSSL, but there was no dependency there. Easy to find. And I check in depsdev. And OpenSSL, I know it's a library, but it didn't show. So you have to be careful here and do your homework. Because there are tools, but they don't always tell you the truth. The American authorities have defined the minimum requirements of an SBOM. That is, you have to have a supplier name, the SBOM author could be a tool, and a timestamp, and a unique ID, of course, for the SBOM. But then, component name, component version, dependencies of component, and component identifiers. That's the minimum. So you can build that tree of dependencies. Right? Sounds easy. So what's a name? Component name. If you look in the vulnerability database, you have Microsoft, Microsoft, Inc., Microsoft, Inc. dot, Microsoft Incorporated, and that's just a company. And how do you follow Word and all the different names, right? So you build an SBOM and you want to use the component name and version to verify with a vulnerability database. Sounds so simple. Back to code. So you have curl from Daniel, the original. Curl in Yocto, curl in a Linux distro where they added some patches. You have Microsoft curl, which isn't Daniel's code at all. They just stole the name because people are used to use curl. And PUP curl extension, Debian curl package, Red Hat curl package, backported LTS. Which one have you got? If your SBOM say curl, why do you go to check? We spent hours on this in the SBOM forum and came up with a document where we say package URL. Package URL is a specification that tells you for all the stuff that is packaged where your software came from. If it's PySpy or Maven or something else, what's the name, what's the version, so you can trace the origin. And yesterday I got news from the CV project that they actually accepted the new version, JSON schema for CVs, that the SBOM forum in OWASP contributed to. We added Perl, and now it's a standard. So we can get Perls in the CVs and we get proper matching. So package URL is critical, and this is also part of the standardization within OWASP CycloneDX project that we will take to ECMA. And as added this today, I'm so proud, part of the CV 5.1. Really good. So check out package URLs, that will be a lot of use. But of course, people will make something simple here. They will run a scanner and say, I got my SBOM. And look at the SBOM. There's no dependencies, or there are bad names, or something else missing. So there are a lot of discussions out there about how we can measure SBOM quality and where we can set requirements. It's not enough that you have a file with a couple of pieces of data that's called .sbom. There has to be something in there that we can work with. Many different formats. I won't go through all the details. SPDX, CycloneDX, we added attestations, we added cryptography bill of materials. We had a very great, wonderful seminar in Dataföreningen about post-quantum crypto. And this will come at the same time as the CRA for many companies, that we will likely have to change all the crypto, all the certificates, all the PKIs. And in order to get your priorities straight, you need an inventory, a cryptography bill of materials that we can speak about another time. But of course, there are companies selling you products, and they will scan everything automatically, and they will fix your SBOM. The first time you run it will stink. You have to learn by yourself, you have to evaluate, you have to know what's a good SBOM. And you have to trim the software or say, okay, this is input to my SBOM, but it's not my SBOM because I need to add stuff that they missed or did something. So it's far from the truth. Some just use Debian packages to produce an SBOM for your Debian system. Didn't discover that when running Ansible, I transferred 10 different binaries and added a few libraries on the way. It's not even there. So, where SBOM fails, completeness. We're missing components, over delivery. They add a lot of stuff that shouldn't be in there because, I mean, configurations and etc. won't have vulnerabilities, right? Depth doesn't track the tree. They miss open source licenses. And the naming of components. That's the worst part, because then you won't match. And I won't go through because I'm running out of time, Vexes, but log in on Thursday lunch on our lunch seminar, because a colleague of Christopher there that I keep harassing, Jekaterina something, will talk about vulnerability exchange documents. But basically, this is something related to your SBOM, could be a separate file, where you run the SBOM with a vulnerability management database, you will get a list of stuff. Most of that stuff won't affect your customer, your user. So how do you tell the user in a machine parsable way? That's where the VEX comes in. For each vulnerability found, we can say that, I know this, we're affected, get an update. Known, not affected, don't worry about this. Whether the customer trusts you or not, that's not the issue. You can mark this as under investigation. Hang on, be careful, we're looking at it, or fixed. There's a lot of metadata in the VEX as well, but this is something you likely will have to update almost every single day for a complex product and embedded learning system. Right? So we'll talk more about that later. So let's try to come to some conclusions about SBOMs. It's handiwork. No scanner can produce your SBOM. You have to be in control yourself. The scanners are input to your SBOM work, but don't believe what they're saying. You will need to integrate this in your CI/CD process. I have a lot of ideas about that. I'll show you a slide soon. But my vision is to get a daily list for the stand-ups in the morning saying, oh, this is the new vulnerabilities. What do we do? You need to run multiple scanners. And I try to define something I call a baseline SBOM for your product. This is the one that I trust. I'm manually verified. And every scanner input, I will compare to this and see, oh, I have new differences. There's something new happening. And evaluate whether I should change my baseline or not. And don't forget the build systems and all of that, all your test tools, build tools, compilers, everything. So, looking at this, if you're managing a product, you will have a lot of inputs from open source project, commercial vendors, other things. You will get bad things when you compare with CVE data. You need to run an assessment and figure out what to do. And this will take a lot of resources and a lot of expertise. Does this vulnerability actually mean something for our customers? Are my customers at risk? You have to know the software for evaluating that. And you end up with a mitigation, either update or say no action. And this model is something I'm teasing all vendors that call me and say, we have solved the problem, book me a seminar. And they, oh, we'll come back to you. But we still need that process. And SBOMs are not done yet. There's a lot of work, especially in the naming. You probably have in the IT department an inventory of all your hardware, all your software. And there has to be a name that connects that to your SBOM and the SBOM to the components. So we have other naming problems as well. SBOMs are fun. I think this is really fun. I'm excited by new technology, and there's so many cool tools coming out open source here. Look at OpenSSF, look at CycloneDX. There's a lot of software being developed there that we can run. Within CycloneDX, we have a sister project called Dependency Track, which is where you upload all your SBOMs and you get these reports. You can create filters. It's really cool software, and it's all API driven, so you can integrate it beautifully in your CI/CD process, and it's open source. So, this will lead to more secure software, but this is all about the dependencies. The elephant in the room is, of course, your source code, but that's something OWASP is working with every day, every night, so we have to continue that work. They're profitable because automation, right? Having control of your dependencies means low risk, better planning, and properly managed. This can save you from a lot of fines in CRA, and your customers will be more secure. I hope that's a benefit. But we need to work together here to form the best current practice. This is a whole new area, and that's why I'm so excited to come to talk with you, and I hope we can continue discussions in various forums. We need to share tools, tool chains, experiences, learning how to work with GitHub, GitLab, all the various tools we use, and dependency track and other things. We also need to find ways to share knowledge and work together to mitigate vulnerabilities. OpenSSF, the Open Source Security Foundation, they just started a project called Cyrene that will connect open source developers and work with security incidents. So we need to keep our customers secure while keeping costs under control. And that's my final word. Now to PR, and I haven't got the slide. It says end of show here. In September 23 and 24, we're running a conference called the Nordic Software Security Summit, where we're going to talk about all of this. Check out Föreningen Kompetens or my account on LinkedIn, and you'll find more information. And I have a call for papers out now. At least one in the audience have contributed their paper. So let's work together and make a great conference. Thank you. Do we have... If you want to ask something, I think we have a few minutes. Sean has a microphone.
I don't think it's...
Yeah, back to CRA. You mentioned keeping track of historical data of older versions, but isn't there writing about keeping your software up to date, making it available for free, would lessen the burden of keeping track on historical versions?
It doesn't say that customers have to update. You have to provide them with automatic upgrades, but they should be able to refuse them. And if a customer has an old piece of software and it's used in an exploit, then NISA or CERT-SE will come to you and ask you for all the proof.
Okay.
You said that configuration owned I don't remember exact words, but there is a fine line between configuration and dependencies.
Yeah.
Because the configuration will not be in the SBOM, but the dependencies will be. And that's a line I would like you to draw very clear, please.
Well, it's not a very clear line in my head either. And I realized after saying it that, oh, that came out bad, and I moved on. But you caught me bad. In OWASP CycloneDX, we have support for configuration snippets as well, because those are important. In the CRA, we talk about secure by default. The configuration needs to be secure by default, and you may need to prove that. But you won't get... I have another talk about SBOMs where I take a lot of corner cases, and there are corner cases. We had a huge discussion in Asterisk when I was one of the active developers, because the default config of Asterisk had a severe problem that caused security issues. And if customers used it, they were in danger. But many developers in the team said, no, we can't open a CV because it's not our fault if customers have a bad configuration. Said, this is used in all the books, all the websites, everywhere, and it's going to cause problems. We have to issue a CV. But they didn't want to call that a vulnerability. They called that stupid users. I didn't really agree. So yeah, it's
just a follow-up. Can you actually get CVE for a bad configuration?
A bad default configuration, absolutely. There's one I get mail every morning from my Debian systems, and there's one on the top that Debian refused to fix. The default configuration of engines, blah, blah, blah. So yeah. You can get CVEs for protocols, that's part of my other examples. You get CVEs for crypto algorithms. You can get CVEs for a lot of stuff that you haven't got in your SBOMs. So.
You even had a CV for XZ incident.
For?
The XZ incident.
We have a CV for the XZ incident, yes.
Backdoor malware.
Yeah. And that caused other CVs for, was it Fedora, that hang-on was linked to that. So, yeah. More questions? This is fun.
Back to CRA. Are you aware if these CE marking requirements will be different for business to consumer or business to business products?
That's a very good question. Normally in legislation, like in Sweden with the consumer buying law and the buying law, konsumentköplagen och köplagen, we have separated that. But in CRA it's the same.
Thank you.
So tagging along to a previous question regarding like where do you actually draw the line for software that should be part of the SBOM? I'm thinking like, is it possible that perfect is the enemy of good here? Like I'm talking about like shipping the artifacts and stuff and having SBOM for that, but also like if looking at the build machine, for example, you have like firmwares, you have drivers, you have all of those kind of things. Like where do you draw the line for what's been part of the build process? Do you see my question? Like where?
The answer is up here.
Yeah.
We need to work together to figure this out. The CRA legal text has sloppy text about SBOMs, saying that, well, you need to track at least the top level dependencies. But that doesn't make sense because the devil is in the details. The stuff below that hurts. Look at XZ.
Yeah.
So I think the horizontal regulation standards will be a bit more detailed. Yes?
Thank you very much for the talk. Going back to the overview of the whole talk, you started introducing CRA and then you started talking about SBOMs, and I wanted to clarify, I haven't read the CRA yet, but I was curious if they are explicit about SBOMs or.
They are very explicit about the requirement to have an SBOM. If something happens, you have to have it. They say that they reserve the right to define approved SBOM formats in the future. They say that if you deliver an SBOM to the customer, something, but you have to have an SBOM, especially if you're certified. We've been in meetings with ENISA, and ENISA says that they will get your SBOM, and any vulnerability in there will be seen as non-compliance. And we're like, well, you have to read our vexes. If you don't agree, then we have a discussion. But no. It's like, but I may not execute that code. My customers won't be in danger. So I hope they're going to change that.
Thank you.
But every software has vulnerabilities.
Every software has bugs. I've written so many of them myself. And they have vulnerabilities. CRA is not about making it illegal. It's about defining a process. You do a risk analysis, and based on that, you have a process of managing your software.
I have one more question about where you draw the line where an SBOM applies. So if I build an app and publish it in the App Store, it needs an SBOM, right?
You need to have an SBOM.
Yeah.
I may require, if I'm a big enough customer to you, I may require you to publish an SBOM to me.
But the web page will never require an SBOM. That's a really fine line.
That's a
nowadays.
very good question. In the open source world, we worked can use the word lobby towards the EU when things were really bad with CRA. And we had an Irish lawyer, not the Northern Ireland, but Southern Ireland, that during a meeting suddenly said, downloading JavaScript, that may be placing a product on the market. This is going to be fun. So I can't answer that question, sorry. But you're on to something.
Hello. You just mentioned that if you're a customer, you need to request to receive this report of the S1.
I would, yeah.
So having access to that itself is already a sensitive information, because if a threat actor have access firsthand of what version is vulnerable, then it makes it easier, right?
That's a very good question. And I have to say, I'm sorry first. Okay? Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay, because I'm going to answer you. In the SBOM forum, we had a security guy saying that, well, I looked at 3,000 medical devices used in hospitals and clinics all over the US. I took the firmware, made SBOMs, found so many problems. I informed vendors. The best response I got was one vendor that closed their email for me. Every email from my domain just bounced. So believing that there are hidden secrets in the SBOM, well, the bad guys, they have that information already. But there are many people who are protective, especially companies with lawyers. Be aware of companies with lawyers, be aware of the lawyers. We had them in our meetings as well. So when I'm working now with the Transparency Exchange API, we're adding authentication. So a vendor can say only my customers may download the SBOMs from my products because they contain sensitive information. But the rest of the world, the security researchers say, oh, we already have that information. Problem is the good guys doesn't have it, who follow stuff and don't look at binaries in that way. So, nah. I think that people will be scared at first of delivering full SBOMs, but I think after a while, I mean, look at this. You have to publish with the CRA all vulnerabilities for your product publicly. No login, no authentication, publicly. So customers can make an assessment before purchase. After a certain time, you have so many published vulnerabilities. I have your SBOM.
So a follow-up on that.
Yeah, it's a tough.
To tie together like
Yeah.
our like thought process. I totally agree on those delivered artifacts, but like you basically are disclosing your whole build pipeline. Like we're talking about software
that's
supply
not
chain.
for customers.
Sorry?
That's for checking your own systems.
Okay,
And-
so you don't have to include that in the SBOM that builds the artifact that you ship to customer.
Yeah, I talked about an external SBOM and all the rest.
Okay.
The rest is for you to assure, and if something happens with a release of your software, an exploit, then probably an ESA or someone else, CertSE, will want to look at all those artifacts.
Okay, but you don't have to expose those like externally to some customer because that was
No.
part of your build pipeline.
No.
Okay, because
In
then
a
it's
if you're in the military industry, maybe,
Okay.
but
Perfect.
it's very vertical niches.
Because those kind of information disclosure, those were the things that I had in mind when I talked about
Okay,
like
sorry.
where do you draw the line? Because
Sorry. Yeah.
in that case you actually expose like your whole like build pipeline and like that could be used to target you
Absolutely.
like externally for like SolarWinds attacks or like
That-
those kind of things.
That's also why I would be careful with my external SBOM to filter out the information. And we're talking about that for a coming release of CycloneDX to be able to automatically delete information in the SBOM that is not for public use. Hi.
I have a question. So, some companies are huge. They have like a lot of products. They have like a bunch of companies they acquired, for example. And when you require an SBOM from them, can they say, we're only gonna give you the SBOM for the specific product that you use, or you are like a customer of our acquired entity, for example? Can it happen, or do they need to disclose everything they have?
I mean, in a CRA, you don't have to disclose any SBOMs at all. But I believe customers, especially larger customers, will require that when purchasing software in public tenders and others. They will require SBOM because IT management needs that information to protect their systems.
But in that case, can you say like, we're only gonna disclose the information that's relevant to you? Or do they need to do for like everything they have, all products?
They need information of the product that you delivered. Your build systems and the rest, that's up for you, right? Those are your internal security mechanisms. But the product you delivered, yeah. But if you delivered now a container, a Docker container, then you have an operating system. If you deliver an embedded system, you have firmware, and you delivered firmware, you need SBOM, your SBOM to include that firmware from the vendor. We have an interesting case with a USB device in a product with a vendor in Asia that doesn't respond to anything. And we will simply have to replace that.
So you talked about challenges with naming, and you mentioned that you arrived at a kind of suggestion that URL will be used for kind of dispatching
Package URL.
packages, package URL, yeah. But is there kind of, I mean, URLs themselves can be fairly volatile. Is there some guarantee of stability that you need to
Package
require?
URL isn't a web URL. It's nothing you click on. It's a naming for a package in a package repository. Thank you.
Okay, but it assumes certain kind of type of package directory, or what exactly is the requirement for this package URLs?
I would love to talk about that. I haven't got slides on it, but package URL is basically an opaque name that includes which repository, which name, and which version. You can have other attributes to it as well, but you should see it as a rather opaque name because you use that opaque string to match with the same string in the CVs in the future. So you don't have to resolve it to anything. A lot of people are trying to resolve it, and Philip Omberdam, who wrote the spec, say, no, don't resolve it. It's just a name, but a unique name. Because the CPEs that's been in use up to now, they weren't defined by the vendors. They were defined by 25 people in the MVD. And I didn't mention that because I ran out of time, because we're in a shit hole right now. I can finish up with that. Do you want to hear about the shit?
Yeah.
Okay. CVEs are reported by vendors all over the world. They become CNAs, CV numbering authorities, and they report to the CV database, which is managed by Mitra with American funding. CVE database is input to the National Vulnerability Database in the US. Okay? Hosted by NIST, financed by CISA. In February 15th, they stopped. And they added the severity, the CVS score. They added the name, the CPE, and affected versions of products. They stopped. They're now 50,000 CVs behind. And all the management systems connect to the MVD to see if you have any vulnerabilities, and they're nowhere to be found. We've been very, very secure since February 15th. There's been like 500, and they didn't tell anyone. And I've been in so many different meetings about this. They didn't tell anyone what happened. Obviously, there's a problem with funding, but they're so far behind now, so that they're outside of the equation. But the whole world's vulnerability handling depended on 25 people that when we had a meeting with them 1.5 years ago, they didn't have funding. So we still don't know the truth here. But as of now, the CVEs are, the CVE organization is encouraging the companies and organizations that contribute to the CV database, Red Hat, GitHub, every vendor on earth. Daniel Stenberg in Curl is a CNA for Curl. They want them to add CVSS, CPE, and not Perl, and the full information. They didn't do that. But we still have a lot of CVs that aren't added metadata. Now CISA started the other day a catastrophe emergency project to enrich the CVs that are missing. But we still don't know. In addition, ENISA, ENIS2, got money to create a European vulnerability database. Looking at this from an open source perspective, well, I'm in Europe, but European database, I want a worldwide database. But having the worldwide system, especially that we all have to use it because of the CRA and ENIS2, funded by one single government that doesn't even fund them, that's scary. So we have a lot of meetings and discussions in various forums to discuss what can be done. And within the SBOM forum in OWASP, we're talking about a federated solution where we have many vulnerability databases. Google already have OSV, GitHub have one, and of course Red Hat, Oracle, Microsoft, all of those. Some people believe this was caused by the Linux kernel. The Linux kernel, up to a certain point in the beginning of this year, said that we don't file any vulnerabilities ourselves because we create code. Whether or not it's vulnerable depends on those that compile it and distribute it. We don't know if this is going to be used in a Mars rover or your laptop. Then suddenly they changed mind and report all bugs as potential vulnerabilities. Overnight, 1,200 CVs from Linux. And it's been like that, hundreds and hundreds every day. So, of course, the MED, if they have problems with funding, now they had like thousands of CVs coming from Linux kernel that they didn't have time or money to handle. So, right now we're operating in the dark. The bad guys, they know the bugs and issues. Our automatic systems can't find them. Hopefully we'll solve this before the CRA. Stay tuned. Follow me on LinkedIn, for instance. Okay, I think we're done. There may still be some leftover pizza and drinks outside, right?
Yes, let's give a big round of applause.